Hi, my name is Erin Giblin, and today I will be talking to you about gender issues in a disaster. This presentation was prepared for the Foundations of Emergency Management course at Florida State University. Gender issues. The effects and impact of disasters, the individual's and institutional response differ for men and women. But why these differences? Cited for the reasons of these differences are three factors. First, biological factors. Second, sexual factors. And third, sociocultural factors/norms. I would like to argue that the biggest reason for these differences is the third factor, sociocultural factors and norms. But what does that mean? Sociocultural factors and norms are social constructs. These are ideas that society has created and ascribed certain attributes towards men and women. These gender issues are not unique to disaster situations. They are seen in society every day. Mainly, these issues are a result of social constructs. Masculinity versus femininity. This is a social construct, stating that men are typically masculine and women are typically feminine. Women are stereotyped as physically and emotionally weak, inferior in comparison to men and boys, dependent, subordinate, and a burden to family. These stereotypes affect the way that women react in the event of a disaster. As with all stereotypes, it is obvious that not all people hold these ideas, but it is prevalent that these ideas are held by some. In real-life situations, women are observed as being more vulnerable. However, women have knowledge and experience in managing and coping with disasters. These instances of experiences should be just as valued as experience that men have. One example of this is research that was done in South Asia. This research was done in 4 different cultural groups. From this research, it was found that gender differences are mainly formed by societal conditioning. Women and men in these societies that they studied in South Asia both prepare for disasters, so both sex groups develop skills and capabilities for survival and recovery from disasters. However, despite shared preparation, women were still absent from formal emergency management planning. This was true for both developed and developing countries. Survival rates for women. During the tsunami in Indonesia, India, and Sri Lanka, 80% of people that died in most of the areas were women. Cultural behavior and expectation influenced this. An example is that in Bangladesh, without proper protection, women do not respond to cyclone warnings to move to safety because they risk being stigmatized by society. Women in leadership roles. In 1976, the women's civil society movement began in India. This movement discussed initiatives by addressing environmental issues through a disaster risk reduction perspective. In 1995, the Women's Net Kobe hotline was formed. This hotline was established for women to speak out for equal opportunity and rights. In 1995, there was an earthquake in Japan, and women were able to express anger and sorrow after this event happened. They were upset because during this event, women faced discrimination in shelters, at home, and workplaces after the earthquake. There was a lack of health and sanitation care that most women needed, and there were 1,000 more female casualties than male. Another example of women in leadership roles was the 2004 International Gender Equality and Disaster Risk Reduction Workshop. This was held in Honolulu. It was dedicated to coming up with new initiatives to incorporate ways to encourage equality in disaster for women. Also, in 2005, the Emergency Management Professional Organization for Women's Enrichment was formed. This was dedicated to advancing women's careers in the emergency management field. Another example of women in leadership is Kay Goss. In 1994, she was appointed the first female Associate Director of FEMA. The Future in Gender Issues in Emergency Management. These initiatives have been created by the Honolulu Gender Equality and Disaster Risk Workshop that was spoken about in the previous slide. These were developed as ways for gender equality to be more prevalent in emergency management in the future. The first thing that we must have is we must guarantee the representation of grassroots and wider civil society organizations by providing resources and access to information. The second thing is we must incorporate gender and risk reduction analysis as a compulsory element of all development projects. The third is we must ensure that dynamics of disaster risk and environmental analysis are considered in an integrated manner. And the fourth is we must highlight gaps in Millennium Development Goals in terms of disaster risk reduction and gender. Thank you for listening to my presentation.